What is the Bible and Beer Consortium? The name itself is actually a linear explanation of the event. First, a topic is given from a biblical perspective. These topics are pertinent to what is being discussed in everyday life. The BBC attempts to present strong answers to life's greater ontological questions. Second, this lecture or sermon is given in a pub.
Can we get to something that provides a certain foundation where there are no more whys? In Christianity, we would teach that God is the ground of things like goodness and truth and beauty.
And then finally, the lecture is further explained or defended in an open mic Q&A.
You said that it seems that your main argument against Christianity is the excessive suffering in the world, correct?
The Bible and Beer Consortium, to present the truth of God as it is to people as they are.
This episode of the Bible and Beer Consortium is sponsored by Humble Beast artist Jackie Hill Perry.
I know you read about him, but tell me, did you read right? Did you Andy Minio? Tell me, did you see light? Did you see heights that sees your needs until it seems you seem to fee fight? From Jamaican patience, say I want more man, no need fight. My Levi stretched with death in them jeans with dead denim unclean for touching bodies for hobbies. We beat the Levites, enough with that. God saw the treason from the start, kinda like a lumberjack. He's happy with the sun, in fact, no need for other planets. Himself exceeds the ocean, so no need for an Atlantic. Advantage is enough, it's us that must cut up the lust for stuff that wasn't custom cuts. A common stuff, a stomach with the glut it wants is God. Our affections are infected. We read but we don't see, we backwards. Our actions act dyslexic. The exit is exactly what Matthew said. It's actually finding pleasure in the treasure that was buried and resurrected. It's God. He's exactly what we crave. If happiness didn't happen, tend to grab it from the grave. But listen, Christian slaves.
Our first speaker is Carol Everett. Carol Everett's life has been entrenched in women's reproductive health choices. Her unplanned pregnancy at 16, 6 years of selling abortions to other women to justify her own, 35,000 abortions, the death of one woman, and major surgery on 19 abortion patients brought Carol to a crossroads. She experienced a life-altering change when she came to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ in 1983. Answering God's call, Carol uses her experiences and faith to help women who face reproductive crisis with positive, life-affirming options. The Heidi Group partners with these women and their families to meet the needs of a crisis pregnancy with scriptural solutions. Once the baby's life is secure, immediate needs must be met, such as stabilizing the family and providing referring resources to cover basic needs. Long-term plans to facilitate a positive, self-sufficient future, spiritually and economically, are determined on an individual basis. The Heidi Group's ultimate goal is to lead women and families to secure lives in Christ and economic stability. Carol's been invited to share her testimony on national broadcasting programs with Mike Huckabee of Fox News, Matt and Lori Crouch of Trinity Broadcasting Network, Dr. James Dobson of Focus on the Family, Point of View, Truth to Transform, and Pat Robertson of the 700 Club. Carol's metamorphosis from hardened pro-choicer to a loving pro-life advocate is detailed in the book Blood Money, Getting Rich Off a Woman's Right to Choose. The ministry has also released 2 videos, The Light of Life and Abortion Techniques. Presenting tonight and speaking to the topic, Should Abortion Be Legal? Please welcome Carol Everett.
Thank you. Thank you very much, and thank you for coming tonight. Appreciate you all coming out. This is an interesting, I can't see you. I can't see your eyes. Speaking about this, I'm coming from the other side of the issue because I'm going to stand for life. And I have several points I'd like to make tonight. And first is for the woman. We many times think the woman is making a life choice that's going to release her from the problem of an unplanned pregnancy. But what we've found as women who've had abortions, and I have had one, is that this is bondage. We now know that women who experience abortion have problems with future pregnancies, including sterility. 1 out of 4 women who experience an abortion have problems with future pregnancies. We know that women who have abortions have post-traumatic stress disorder, post-abortion syndrome that so traumatizes us. One study says that over 90% of us have emotional trauma that we do not admit for 5 to 15 years, which means that we hide that, we're self-destructive, we self-punish for that period of time until we finally admit our pain and start our grieving healing process. And the studies that show from pro-choice doctors, physicians, and PhDs who have studied to try to prove that abortion is not linked to breast cancer, but have proven themselves that it does. If a woman has an abortion in the first 12 weeks of pregnancy, she is 18 or under, she increases her risk of breast cancer by 50%. If she's 19 or under, she increases her risk of breast cancer by 30%. Multiple abortions, family history of breast cancer, 100% risk of breast cancer. That's a very large price for the cost of an abortion for a woman. The baby? Yes, the baby is gone. The baby is erased. But you know, we now know that that baby has a heartbeat 21 days after conception. We know at conception those 46 chromosomes come together, 23 pairs, with the potential for 20,000 to 25,000 genes that unite to form that unique human being. And we don't turn to dogs or frogs, we turn into human beings. And babies have a heartbeat at 21 days and a brainwave at 12 weeks. Now that's what we determine death with, heartbeat and brainwave. Why don't we think about life that way? And of course, the woman is not merely a container or an instrument to give birth to that baby. That baby can be a different blood type, a different sex. It is not a part of the mother's body. And if you look at Scripture, it's very interesting what God has to say about the woman. We all look at Psalm 139 as Christians, and we think that the verses 12 through 16 or 13 through 16 speak about the baby. We don't read the first 12 verses of that, which speak about the mother. But let me take a moment to read it to you tonight. O Lord, you have searched me and known me. You know my sitting down and my rising up. You understand my thought afar off. You comprehend my path and my lying down, and are acquainted with all my ways. For there is not a word on my tongue, but behold, O Lord, you know it altogether. You've hedged me behind and before. You've laid your hand upon me. Can't see. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It is high. I cannot attain it. Where can I go from your spirit, or where can I flee from your presence? If I ascend into heaven, you are there. If I make my bed in hell, behold, you are there. If I take the wings in the morning and dwell in the uttermost parts of the sea, even there your hand shall lead me, and your right hand shall hold me. If I say, surely the darkness shall fall on me, even the night shall be light about me. Indeed, the darkness shall not hide from you. But the night shines as the day. The darkness and the light are both alike to you. What does that say? It says God knows where that woman is. And we always hear the argument about rape and incest. But if, indeed, rape or incest occurs, that's God taking something the enemy intended for evil and use it for good. But let's explore those a little more. Rape. That's a horrible crime against that woman. But you know, we don't punish a child for the sin of the father. We don't want to kill that baby for what the father did. And we know what abortion does to a woman. So we want to be able to help her be all that she can be and continue. If she continues that pregnancy, there are over 10 million couples waiting to adopt 1 or 10 babies. And she knows at the end of that pregnancy that she has done the very best she can, and she can go on. Our studies show that if a woman places a baby for adoption, she may struggle with that decision for a while, but after 5 years, she is going on with her life. If she has an abortion, it's up to 15 years. Life is the answer. But let's go back to statistics. Abortions for rape are less than 1%. 97% of abortions today are for the mother's convenience. 3% are rape, incest, and risk of life of the mother. We just don't see abortions for rape. We did a funny thing when I was in the abortion business. We decided it would be a great advertising opportunity to say that we did abortions on women that were free if they had truly been raped and reported to the police. We went on television, we went on the radio, we told everyone we'd do abortions free on women who were raped and reported. Not one single woman came to us. The truth of the matter is, that's one of those things the abortion industry always uses against pro-lifers. Incest is another thing. That's a horrible crime against a woman. But we don't take her out of this abusive situation give her an abortion and put her back in that abusive situation once again. Life is the answer. And you know, there are other things too. If you go on and read in here, it talks about the baby. For you formed my inward parts, you covered me in my mother's womb. I will praise you, for I am fearfully and wonderfully made. Marvelous are your works, and that my soul knows very well. My frame was not hidden from you when I was made in secret and skillfully wrought in the lowest parts of the earth. Your eyes saw my substance being yet unformed, and in your book they were all written, the days fashioned for me, when as yet there were none of them. God formed that baby. If he allowed conception to occur, he has a purpose for that life, for that baby and for that mother. And there's a positive way. Give that child life, for even the Declaration of Independence says, I love this, but I haven't memorized this. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, rights that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. If conception occurs, that child has the same right as we do. I think we tell a woman she can do anything in the world except be what she was intended to be if we tell her that she can choose to end her baby's life. And one of the reasons I feel so strongly about that is I took the life of my own child. I've lived it. It's not something I'm proud of, but I need to tell you why I'm here tonight. I have 3 children. The first one was conceived when I was very young and not married. It was a different world. You either disappeared into a maternity home where you were so shamed that they changed your name, or you had a fast wedding and the baby came early. The father and I had the fast wedding, the baby came early. And while I was on the table looking at this beautiful little blonde boy, his father went to the front office and named my son Joe Bob. Yeah, you can laugh. I don't know what I expected. His name was Jim Bob. I wish you could meet Joe Bob. He doesn't wear coveralls. He's the president of his own company. He's married to Carol Everett Jr. There are 2 of us in this world. And that Carol is adopted. And she is the mother of the first planned pregnancies in my entire family. I think it's interesting how young people plan things now. You know, they buy a couch, buy a car, have a baby, have a baby. They wanted to have a son, and 18 months later they wanted to have a daughter, and the Lord blessed them. They had a son, and 18 months later they had a daughter, and 11 months later they had a surprise. And as I just love to say that as no one else I know, they deserve those 3 teenagers. Life is crazy at their house. My daughter is too much like me to talk about. She was conceived when I was 19. And she's married. I named her Kelly before I went to the delivery room. You see, that would work either way, boy or girl. Kelly is married and has 3 girls. She has a 17-year-old, a 14-year-old, and her surprise is now 10 years old. I learned a long time ago that I need to be very frank with my grandchildren. And since I know that the abortion industry, because I did it in the abortion industry, uses sex education to sell abortions, I talk to my grandchildren about sex starting when they're 10 years old. I want them to hear it from me. I don't want them to be ashamed. And my friends, you would not believe the things that happen around me with their friends. They drag them off the soccer field and say, she doesn't know anything about sex. This is my grandmother, talk to her. My grandson brings this young man in the house, says, hello, I'd like for you to meet my grandmother, and leaves him in the house with me and goes outside, and it takes that poor boy about 10 minutes to figure out, to tell me what he's got to say. But we're very open about it at our house. I think it's important for us to understand that God invented sex, we didn't, and we need to recognize that we have a responsibility when we have sex, and that's when we have the choice. If we've made the choice to have sex, then we have accepted the responsibility if pregnancy comes along with it. My 3rd child is in heaven. You know, Scripture tells us that God uses everything for good, and I can't help but wonder what he's going to do with that army of babies in heaven. I used to wonder what I would say to her when I saw her, or what she would say to me. Would she say, Mother, why did you kill me? But when I get to heaven, I'll hold her for the first time. I named her Heidi The name has derivatives of noble in several languages, but that's not what it means to me. It means hidden, for she's hidden from you, but she is actually why I'm here tonight. Studies are very, very scary. The statistics are all over the board with how many abortions have happened in this nation. 1 out of 4 women sitting in church pews, 1 out of 4 women, 1 out of 3 women. You hear all sorts of numbers, but the truth of the matter is, for every woman, there's a man. And they're unmourned deaths, and there's pain associated with abortion. And someday, and you sitting right where you are tonight, you can think of people you know who've had abortions whose lives changed immediately, who started self-destructive patterns, who started down a different path. It's not hidden. It's out for all of us to see, but we need to admit it, accept it, understand it, and recognize it. In the last few weeks, we've all seen, or maybe you haven't seen, maybe you haven't taken the time to watch the videos filmed in Planned Parenthoods across this country with the stories of how they are taking babies' bodies and selling the parts. I don't know if you've seen the one that just kills me, that where the baby's on the table and it jumps, it's still alive, it's fully intact. I don't know if you've heard the stories about how they are working to get an intact baby, and yet no one talks about the fact if that baby is coming out intact, what they're having to do to the mother's cervix. You see, in order for that baby to be delivered, it has to be, her cervix has to be dilated unnaturally large. A baby doesn't just fall out when it's born, but they want this baby to fall out. So her cervix is dilated to such an extent, I wonder if she'll ever be able to clamp down normally on another pregnancy. Will her cervix be incontinent with future pregnancies? And she's never told what they're doing with her baby. But why do they want an intact baby? Because they can sell every vital organ. They can sell the skin, they can sell the blood, they can sell the brain. And you see, Planned Parenthood's not going to sell Lamborghinis for $75 or $100 procurement cost. But the brokers are selling those up to $24,250. The catalogs were online until these videos came out, and suddenly they went dark. But we were able to print them before they went dark, and we know where the brokers are. And the truth about this matter is the abortionists are being paid directly by the brokers, probably a 10 or 25% of every baby's organ, a liver for $24,250, a thymus for $24,250. My friends, it's time for us to be human. It's inhumane to sell babies' body parts. It's illegal. When are we going to stop these horrible practices? Thank you.
Our second speaker is Lilandra Raw. And I love your bio, by the way. Lilandra's proudest accomplishments are, in no particular order, writing and producing living science videos with Aaron Raw, who's here tonight, based on the next generation science standards, teaching science and language arts in Texas public schools, assisting science teachers with next generation science standards as a curriculum specialist, organizing the Texas Free Thought Coalition, an alliance of secular, regional, and student community groups all over Texas, and founding member of the Secular Asian Community. Speaking to the topic, should abortion be legal? Please welcome Lilandra Raw.
Hello. Before I start, he gave you a few information about me, but I'm also a mother of 3. My oldest is 21, and he has special needs, and I have a daughter and a son who's 12, and lots of women all over the country decide to have families, and I feel like no one person's story should decide for everybody when they want to be a parent. But let me go ahead and get started. Also, there were a few claims like 1 out of 4 abortions cause sterility. Most women suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder after an abortion, and the prevalence of breast cancer that I would like a citation for because I've seen other information. Today, I'm going to be citing the Guttmacher Institute a lot. They are a peer-reviewed site. A lot of us know what peer review means. That means that they submit their work to scientists to review. Okay, and so not all citations are equal. Let me get started. I feel like I have to read that way though and be over here at the mic. So let me move this. Thank you. Also, the Guttmacher Institute is approved by the National Institute of Health, and they've received prestigious government grants that are competed for on population studies. So, here we go. Should abortion be legal? Okay, yes, so let's go home. I'm just kidding. All right. I want to start off by clarifying that I am fully aware that the challenges in my country to obtaining a safe legal abortion have been very damaging to women's reproductive health and pose a real danger of ending safe legal access to abortion to every person who has a need for one in the United States. Before anti-choice activists cheer at the thought of an American without safe legal access to abortion, let's look at what the history and facts tell us about legalizing abortion. A small note before I do that, although crisis pregnancies most often overwhelmingly affect women, there are also trans men with uteruses who also may need abortion access. When I use the term women, I'm not intending to exclude trans men. I acknowledge at the outset this is an issue that affects them also, but the data collected mostly is referring to women. So if I'm using the word women, I'm referring to what the data studies. Abortion has been legal in this country since 1973. According to the Guttmacher Institute, the U.S. was, of course, not the first country to legalize abortion. China was the first in 1958. A broad range of economically developed and less developed countries followed, 21 since 1997. This trend has given 60% of the world's reproductive age women access to legal abortion. What about the remaining 40%? Again, according to the 2007 Guttmacher study entitled Facts and Consequences, Legality, Incidence, and the Safety of Abortion Worldwide, these women live in mostly undeveloped countries, such as those in Africa, where 92% of women, and Latin America, where 97%, live with severely restrictive abortion laws. These countries still labor under colonial attitudes about women, although other countries like Europe have moved on in ours and legalized abortion. What is life like for someone who needs an abortion there? Because if you're going to say you're concerned with life, then you should be sure to be concerned about half the population of a country. In a word, their lives are unsafe. As you can see from this slide, of the 41.6 million abortions that occur in the world, 19.7 million, nearly half, are unsafe. In less developed countries, about 55% of the abortions are unsafe. To put in perspective what this report means by unsafe, that is 70,000 women dying per year from unsafe abortions. About 8 million more have complications that range from anemia to infertility. Of the ones with serious complications, 3 million will never see medical care for a variety of reasons, according to the report. In countries where the average salary is $2 a day, many can't afford a doctor-assisted abortion that ranges from $100 to $1,000. Add to that the procedure is illegal and unregulated, and the stigma associated with seeking an abortion, and it is easy to see why an abortion is unsafe in countries where it's not legal. They are often forced to take matters into their own hands with such methods as drinking bleach and applying pressure to the abdomen that often cause serious complications like hemorrhaging. The human toll of 5 million women being hospitalized every year tallies $460 million. The cost of providing contraception to stop women from seeking unsafe abortions in Nigeria, for example, is a quarter of the cost of the medical treatment of unsafe abortion complications. Oddly, anti-choicers like Carol Everett are often against contraception also. This compounds and exacerbates the problem, but I will get to that in a moment. Half of the world's 42 million abortions are performed in unsafe conditions where the procedure is illegal. So as everyone can see, making abortion illegal doesn't stop abortions. It just exerts a horrific toll of suffering and death where it is illegal. Here in the US, abortion-related deaths have plummeted since the practice became legal and regulated in 1973. Before 1973, according to the Guttmacher Institute, in the year 1930, abortion was listed as the official cause of death for 2,700 women. By 1965, the number of deaths had fallen to 300 after the use of antibiotics to treat infections was developed. After 1973, there was a dramatic drop in abortion-related deaths. And you can see from the chart here. And most importantly, prohibiting abortion has never been shown to stop abortions. So we can go home now, right? The answer is abortion should be legal, and to ensure its safety, and making it illegal will not end the practice of abortion or even minimize it. If only it were that easy, right? And we were done here, having answered the debate question, should abortions be legal? Because the issue of keeping abortions safe by keeping them legal is not enough for anti-choicers to stop their relentless attacks, I'm going to have to keep going. The only serious answer I've seen that addressed safety concerns with prohibiting legal abortion was during a debate with Matt Dillahunty and Christine Kruszelnicki, now a pro-life humanist. Ironically, for a self-identified humanist, she suggested that criminal penalties be imposed on people who seek illegal abortions. So their situation is so desperate, like it is for over 20 million worldwide, that they will endanger their own lives to end an unwanted pregnancy. But then compound that with being imprisoned, and this is somehow a humane solution to the problem of unsafe illegal abortions. Which brings me to the other argument against the problem of unsafe illegal abortion. My opponent's argument, because the first topic of this debate was, is abortion murder, is that abortion is murder. So regardless, a crime is being committed in their minds. Whatever the cost of imprisoning women in a desperate situation in a nation that already is struggling to pay for incarcerating the most people on the planet, let's lock them up. If that is a good solution for the problem. So we're going to be here a little while longer, and I'll address the abortion is murder argument. According to Merriam-Webster, murder is the crime of unlawfully killing a person, especially with malice aforethought. So in order for there to be murder, there has to be a person. Most legal definitions of the word person differentiate natural human beings from corporate personhood. You can't murder a corporation, right? So if a fetus is being murdered during an abortion, that fetus would have to be a person or a human being. One of the arguments that often comes up at this point is that a fetus is made up of human cells. This is about the only anti-choice observation that is remotely scientific that I hear, because just like history, science isn't on their side either. A fetus is in fact made up of human cells, but that doesn't make one human being. Otherwise, human cancerous tumors would be human beings also. Is chemotherapy in any way murder? No. So, what about sperm and ovum? They are definitely human cells also, but are they human beings? That would make the males of our species guilty of genocide. So, and that would also make some of you cannibals. Okay. Also, that would make 30 to 50% of the people who conceive, knowingly or not, and miscarry, guilty of negligent homicide, which at some level we know isn't true, even if a miscarried fetus has human cells. I really don't want to argue the Bible on this because some people wrote that long ago, and it can't be considered a medical authority. As proof of this, the Bible has conflicting accounts on when it considers personhood. So there are the I knew you in the womb, and she was citing you're fearfully and wonderfully made. But there are also that that breath is when life begins. So it's contradictory and hard to make a case that way. On the question of murder, don't even want to go there in the Bible. It simultaneously says that thou shalt not kill while condoning the murdering of the children of your enemies. Nearly 99% of abortions occur before 20 weeks, with 89% of those in the first trimester. The brain isn't fully developed at these stages to do things that fully functional brains of human beings do, such as think or have personal desires. More importantly, does this fetus have a right to use a person's body without their consent? Consent to sex is not consent to being a parent. I am reminded again of something Dillahunty said about how a fully developed child needing a kidney. Can the law compel the mother of that child to donate the kidney against her will to save the child's life? Then why do anti-choicers argue that a person must give birth against their will? Knowing as we do that giving birth to human beings, in particular, has significant risks to the pregnant person, it is a credit to the mothers that knowingly undertake those risks, which include everything from 3rd to 4th degree tears that tear all the way to the anus, which according to the New England Journal of Medicine are thought to affect 35 to 41% of vaginal births. And the risks continue all the way to the extreme end in death. And let us also not forget that, according to a Guttmacher report, 62% of women that sought an abortion already had a child. The decision for them was to better care for the child they already had. However, should anyone risk the known complications of pregnancy without their consent? This is why the decision to give birth should be left to the doctor and the person who's giving birth. But that's not the case as we see at the Republican Party presidential debates. Each candidate vying to brag to Americans about how they defunded Planned Parenthood in their states, the lives of people tossed around like a football, all based on discredited and fraudulent videos, deceptively edited to misrepresent Planned Parenthood as selling parts of fetuses for profit. In every state investigation, Planned Parenthood has been cleared of any wrongdoing. But that won't stop presidential hopeful Carla Fiorina of misrepresenting Planned Parenthood. She's refused to admit that the video that she says and that Carol referred to, showing the harvesting of organs from a fully formed, live, kicking fetus, doesn't exist. Even after it is explained to her that the video was of a stillbirth, not an abortion, and it was deceptively edited with footage of an infant kicking. Yet these tall tales and these urban legends continue. Unfortunately, Everett makes these same sort of claims in her group, on her group Pro-Life Action League website that also sound like they're straight out of urban legends. She recounts stories from her time as the manager of 3 abortion clinics in Dallas. I quote, "I've seen sonograms with the baby pulling away from the instruments that are introduced into the vagina. And I've seen D&E through 32 weeks done without the mother being put to sleep. Yes, they are very painful to the baby, but yes, they are very, very painful to the woman. I've seen 6 people hold a woman at the table while they did the abortion. And also this, which would seem to refute legal abortion as safe, like the case I just laid out." She says this on her site: "The girls that walk out of there are the lucky ones. We were seeing over 500 abortions per month and doing one day second and third trimester abortions. We didn't use the laminaria. We did all the dilation on that one day, and we were seeing a tremendous amount of complications. The girls that walked out of there are the lucky ones. Yes, we had a death, a 32-year-old woman with a 17-year-old son and 2-year-old son. Never made the papers. Her boyfriend felt guilty for his part in the abortion and didn't want to deal with it. Her family thought, yes, she probably had an abortion, but didn't want to deal with it. It never came out, no lawsuit. And then there was a girl who the doctors decided had a fibroid tumor at the back of her uterus. That's a highly common tumor that's rarely malignant. The 2 doctors decided they were just going to pull it out after her abortion. They didn't know they were pulling out the backside of her uterus. And they pulled the uterus out wrong side out of a 21-year-old. She had a hysterectomy. I can't really tell if this one clinic was having atypical amounts and kinds of complications. There should be a medical record to track this many medical problems in the group of 3 Dallas clinics she managed, because these results are not typical. Second and third trimester abortions, like her scare story recounts, are not typical. In fact, 89% of abortions occur in the first trimester. Also, and this came from the Guttmacher Institute also, this is a fact sheet, and this is in direct contradiction to some of the claims she just made. A first trimester abortion is one of the safest medical procedures with minimal risk, less than 0.05% of major complications that might need hospital care, and that's 89% of the abortions that are performed in this country. Abortions performed in the first trimester pose virtually no long-term risk of such problems as infertility, ectopic pregnancy, spontaneous abortion or miscarriage, or birth defect, and little or no risk of preterm or low birth weight deliveries, because they don't carry to term, that last part. Exhaustive reviews by panels convened by the United States and British governments have concluded there is no association between abortion and breast cancer. There's also no indication that abortion is a risk factor for other cancers. Leading experts have concluded among women who have unplanned pregnancy, the risk of mental health problems is no greater if they a single first trimester abortion than if they carry the pregnancy to term. That's a study conducted by the American Psychological Association. The risk of death associated with abortion increases with the length of pregnancy, from 1 death every 1 million abortions at or before 8 weeks to 1 per 29,000 at 16 to 20 weeks, and 1 per 11,000 at 20 weeks or later. Yes, people do die from abortion complications. However, the risk of death, according to the 2012 report in Obstetrics and Gynecology, is lower than the risk of carrying a pregnancy to term and delivering the baby. The risk of death in a full-term pregnancy and delivery is 8.8 per 100,000, and the risk of death from abortion complications is 0.6 per 100,000. A person is 14 times more likely to die from pregnancy and delivery than an abortion. Let me just move this. I have one more bizarre, inexplicable claim for us to look at before I conclude. She claims that she and her clinics had a goal of 3 to 5 abortions per girl. And in order to meet that goal, she created a demand for abortions by getting children interested in sex through sex education. I quote, my goal was to get them sexually active on a low-dose birth control, and that we knew they would get pregnant on. How do you do that? You give them a low-dose birth control pill, and that in order to provide any level of protection, has to be taken accurately at the same time every single day. And you know, and I know, that there's not a teen in the world that does everything the same time every day. I find this claim particularly hard to believe. As a teacher who sat in a classroom during an abstinence-only presentation for 6th grade students in West Texas. Presidents since Ronald Reagan have sunk hundreds of millions of dollars into abstinence-only sex education. I also find it hard to believe her groups went into Dallas schools and pushed low-dose birth control on students in order to make sure they got pregnant. My experience in West Texas is the opposite. The presenter discouraged any type of sex and repeatedly discouraged them from using birth control, especially condoms, because of their failure rate, he kept repeating. And if he had Everett's stated goal of creating a demand for an abortion clinic, he couldn't have done a better job, as West Texas has the second highest repeat teen pregnancy rate in Texas, which has the worst repeat teen pregnancy rate in the country. I mean, isn't that a no-brainer? Discourage people from using contraception, and the unintended pregnancy rate goes up. If there's an abortion provider out there morally reprehensible enough to do what she says she did, there isn't a better way to encourage more teen pregnancies than abstinence-only education. It would seem logical that anyone that wanted to eliminate abortions would encourage and educate people on correct contraception usage. However, she seems to be, with her testimony, to get support against abortions, demonizing contraceptive usage and sowing distrust of sex education. While that seems counterintuitive to discouraging abortions, it's not unusual to the movement that calls itself pro-life, but really is staunchly pro-fetus, to the detriment of real people who need real answers and real help. I hope that no one listening to this is convinced by those claims. However, in the US, and especially Texas, women are losing access to safe legal abortions because of similar distorted claims about Planned Parenthood and legal abortion. Right here in Texas, since House Bill 2 was passed in 2013, 18 of the state's abortion clinics are still left open. The Supreme Court has agreed to decide whether it should rule on the constitutionality of House Bill 2, which limits abortion access to millions of Texans because of draconian restrictions. If the Supreme Court decides it won't hear the case or upholds the current law, a state the size of Western Europe will be left with just 10 clinics. One of the regulations that is the most unfair is that abortion providers must have admitting privileges to hospitals. Then hospitals can be pressured into arbitrarily denying admitting privileges to abortion clinics. The closure by House Bill 2 came on the heels of other closures in 2011 that resulted from budget cuts. If you can see there, these are the the clinics that could remain open. The blue are the clinics that closed as a result of the 2011 budget cuts. And the orange are the ones that could be forced to close. Wendy Davis, who filibustered House Bill 2, said this about the human toll this bill has already taken. When you look at Texas, it's a classic example of why this dialogue about defunding Planned Parenthood at the federal level is such a bad idea. In 2011, 2 years before my filibuster, a very active fight with Planned Parenthood ensued in Texas. It was politics, political demagoguery about getting elected by fomenting the emotion in the GOP's base. Planned Parenthood became the boogeyman in a way it never had before in Texas. And there was an active attempt to defund their non-abortion care services, 7% of what they do. As a consequence of that, we saw over 50 clinics close and even more clinics downsize the number of patients they were able to see. In a 1-year period, 77% of the women who were receiving those services, family planning, breast cancer screening, HIV screening, counseling service, lost them. So we went from over 200,000 women to about 45,000 women who were getting services. There are real consequences to that. When women can't get contraceptive services, unplanned pregnancies go up. In Texas, in 1 year alone, our Medicaid birth rate shot up. It cost Texas taxpayers $136 million extra in 1 year. And that's on top of what it costs at the federal level, because we only paid 20% of those costs at the state level. We know that women have had cancers that have gone undiagnosed. We know that women have had, and men have had STDs that have gone undiagnosed and have therefore spread. This is, to me, the most callous and unacceptable, disappointing part of politics. Real people are being hurt. So that's the point, isn't it? Real people getting hurt because other people want to score political points by shaming reproductive choices. These regressive policies have already wreaked havoc in the states, but none of these politicians are noticing the real people that get hurt every day with the decisions they make. Like a teenage mother who, instead of being given access to contraception, was given a lecture about abstaining from sex by a generation that didn't abstain from sex either. Now, instead of getting an education, she's forced into a cycle of poverty and hopelessness without a high school degree. She was forced into giving birth before she was prepared to. It's time we started caring more about real people who are alive and stop the culture of shaming and putting fetuses ahead of the human rights of people. That's the end of my soapboxing. And if I have any time left, I would concede it to Q&A, of course. I also want to note that often in debates like these, there isn't time to fact-check multiple claims and unpack them. And yes, there were a lot of them. If there are any leftover claims like that, I will post them to my blog on Reason Advocates on Pathos. Thank you.
Lilandra Raw. Cross-examination, 10 minutes each. We'll start with Carol Everett.
Do you want to start first? Do you know how many Planned Parenthood facilities were offering birth control before they were defunded for providing abortions?
All of them.
There were 94 in the state of Texas. Do you know how many Texas now has offering full medical care across the state, even in rural areas, offering at 100% of funded by the Texas state, and no fraud, because Planned Parenthood was caught with $11 million in fraud in their Medicaid billing? Do you know how many are offering that care today? To not only did they expand from 18 to 44, but they went down to 14 to 44. Texas has expanded the services. There are 4,600 doctors and clinics across the state as compared to 94 before.
Okay, you stated that there are actually now more clinics since the defunding, and also Planned Parenthood in Texas, and more clinics have opened and more offering services. How many of these clinics are counseling centers where crisis pregnancy counseling centers?
183. But there are 4,600 medical facilities. I'm on the Health and Human Services Women's Health Advisory Committee. And we have, and as compared to 94 Planned Parenthoods, we have 183 pregnancy centers, and they are separate and apart from 4,600 physicians and clinics offering full medical care across the state, and they're only less reported because the fraud is gone, because Planned Parenthood is gone. And nationally, there were 690 Planned Parenthoods, and there are over 13,000 facilities across the state offering the same well-woman care at a higher level of care, a higher standard, with mammograms. And you heard Cecile Richards admit before the committee that they never did a mammogram. Their mammograms are now offered to these women, and they are now offered full STD testing and treatment. Why don't we give her this one, and you can pull me that one.
I hear that she made a distinction between crisis pregnancy centers and actual physicians and who are offering medical services. A crisis pregnancy center, I'm an ex-Christian, and...
Wait a minute. Were we supposed to be talking without a question now? Are you supposed to be...
I'm answering your question.
Okay, what is the question I asked you? Let's go back to it.
I'm answering the question you were saying. Do I know how many clinics are open and offering services such as contraception? I'm getting
full contraception.
Yes.
The woman's choice of contraception.
Okay.
And so, I am not against contraception. Okay.
Well, it's kind of a mixed message if you're saying that sex education sells people on low-dose birth control.
Well, that's what we did.
You're mistrusting.
That's what we did.
And
let me tell you why. We knew that the sex education would sell abortions, and we also knew that we had to start very early. We couldn't just start at 12 if we wanted 3 abortions between the ages of 13 and 18. And where were you in West Texas? Were you in Midland, Odessa? Midland, Odessa is one of 3 areas in the state that has very good abstinence-only, risk avoidance, abstinence-only education. The rest of the state doesn't have it. But in kindergarten, they put the children in a circle and go around the room and ask the children the same question. What do your parents say to call your private parts? You know and I know every family in this room has a different name for their private parts, so by the time you reach a 3rd or 4th child, it's clear the children don't know what their parents have. And then you say, okay, boys, this is what you have. Girls, this is what you have. Don't be ashamed of your private parts. They go out and they share. Now, what happened? Start to break down the natural modesty, separate them from their parents and their values because they think their parents don't know, and you're becoming the expert. 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade, they pass out books. The books are by Robbie Harris, R-O-B-I-E Harris. They're published by Candlewick Press. They have sex education with both genders in them, using cartoons to show children how to have intercourse. One for 2-year-olds, one that's for 4-year-olds called It's Not the Start. It's so amazing. It's perfectly normal. Why would we show children in the 1st, 2nd, and 3rd grade how to have intercourse? 4th grade, masturbation, masturbated alone until you're comfortable, and then in groups of 4 of the 5 the same sex. And then in the 5th and 6th grade, I was invited into the schools, and I got them to laugh with me about their parents. For if they laughed with me about their parents, they would not go home and tell their parents what we talked about. Then we passed out low-dose birth control pills we knew they would get pregnant on when they came to our clinic. And we passed out do you think that these people that pass out condoms buy the best or the most effective? No, we bought seconds or defective condoms. Our business was abortion, and that's how we sold it. Let me tell you why I did it. I made $25 for each abortion. The last month we were in the business, the last month we were in the business, we had did $545. My income was $13,625, but my goal in the abortion business was $1 million a year. That's why we sold abortions.
Okay. You're talking about Dallas, Texas. Maybe you're talking about the 80s, because in the 1990s, George Bush was governor.
1996.
And he enacted abstinence only.
No, he did that as a president of the United States. $50 million, first year, 1996. First time the pregnancy rate ever decreased in the world, in our world.
Dallas ISD was doing abstinence only education maybe till about 3 years ago.
Now they're doing comprehensive.
Comprehensive.
Comprehensive is how to have sex.
Okay, because I taught in Dallas ISD.
Yeah,
also.
It's how to have sex.
Okay. In answer to the first question, which I didn't
I have a
finish
whole
answering.
page of stuff for you.
It's okay. I just want to differentiate between crisis pregnancy centers because I'm an ex-Christian and an ex-pro-lifer, and I donated my child's bassinet to a crisis pregnancy center, and I took a tour of the pregnancy center in Houston. And they had no medical procedures done there. They had a sonogram machine, which they showed the baby on the sonogram. So, and they talked about, it was actually Christian.
Well, we need to talk about that because I differentiated between pregnancy centers. I said 183 in the state and 4,600 medical facilities. But let's just talk about that. You know, you talked about a fetus. Fetus means little one. That's what it means, little one. It doesn't mean rat, dog, frog. It means little one, and it turns into a human. And now that sonogram literally shows, we all have seen sonograms, and we could see that baby wiggling at 6 weeks and see the heart beating. And we know that because when we have a baby, that's what the obstetrician does with us. So I think we need to correct ourselves there. And the other thing is
2 minutes.
childbirth and safety. Childbirth is recorded. There are codes. Let me tell you why complications for abortions are not recorded. There is no code for it because abortion is an all-cash business. So they never use the medical codes that they do for all other insurance claims. So there is not a code in this nation in any insurance code book for abortion complications. So if they are recorded, they're recorded as maternal complications from childbirth, not from abortion. And that's why we do not know today what the abortion complication rate is as compared to childbirth. But I can tell you in my clinics, 1 woman died and 1 out of every 500 had a hysterectomy, a colostomy, and that's not including the complications such as bleeding or infections, because those are simply not recorded, and women are shamed, and women don't come forward and say, this is what happened to me. That's why you never hear about the lawsuits. I can get 1 line marked off.
Oh, yeah, a question. I think you got a minute left, right? You have a
I'll
question?
give you my minute. What's your question?
Okay. It didn't seem to be a question there. You were saying that...
I was trying to answer what you accused me of earlier.
Okay. Well, all right. I would have to dig up the numbers, but I'm betting that there are differentiated numbers between abortion complications, related death, and also pregnancy-related deaths.
If you can find a code for that in the insurance codes, I hope and pray you'll contact me because we've been looking for it for years. And I want to go back to HB2. I'm ready for my question. What is it? I'm going to answer the HB2 thing anyway.
Okay. Even if abortion was, you were talking about your abortion story, even if that was the wrong decision for you, how can you decide what's right for millions of women in this country?
I think we need to tell women the truth, and I think when women are told the truth about what it is and they're not lied to, and for instance in the abortion business, they ask us 2 questions. Is it a baby? And we told them no. We lied to them because we went in the back and we put every one of those babies back together. At 6 weeks, there's a little arm, legs, spine, and a little bubble head. We knew it was a baby, and we lied to those women. That was not good for women, and women really knew it's a baby because we've all seen them on sonograms now. And the other question that she asked was, does it hurt? And we said no, and we used a visual. We opened our hand and fist and made a fist, and we kept doing this, and when we said your uterus is a muscle, it's a cramp to open it, a cramp to close it, and when she started doing that, we knew we had her, and we had lied to her. Women deserve the truth, and here is the State of Texas, A Woman's Right to Know booklet that they have literally published, and it's interesting to talk about the complications of death and breast cancer and the fetal development right here in the booklet that Texas gives women the truth in. Give women the truth, they choose life. And HB2 simply made the standard for all abortion clinics the same as any surgical facility. You wouldn't have surgery with a physician that did not have admitting privileges at a hospital. You wouldn't go to a surgical facility that wasn't an ambulatory surgical facility. And the interesting thing is that you somehow didn't understand is there are 19 abortion clinics. El Paso opened last week, and it closed 28 abortion clinics that were not willing to meet the minimum standards. All they had to do was spend a little money, and they chose not to spend their money to take care of women. HB2 protected the health of women in Texas, and I am not an ex-Christian. I came to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ, and I am here because of his blood that covered my sin.
Okay. I have another question related to the first one.
Okay.
I'm
sorry.
Even as non-Christians and people who aren't Christians, many people would not choose to lie to children about birth control so that they could get pregnant, so they can give them 3 to 5 abortions. The Bible even says that if you harm 1 hair of a child, that there's a horrific punishment for you in the afterlife. So how are we supposed to believe the claims you're making now, given that most people, Christian or not Christian, would not lie to children in that kind of manner?
That was before I became a Christian. And I came to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ because I understood that Jesus Christ died on the cross for my sins. And by the simple act of faith, of repenting of my sins, asking forgiveness, asking Jesus to come into my heart, asking his blood to cover my sins that I could be free. Now, it would be nice if I could shut up and stop telling this story, but I have to tell it so people know, because I am a truth teller now for Jesus Christ, and that's why I'm here today, because I don't want your children to suffer the same fate of those children whose lives I injured.
How do you also, even if your stories about the clinics are 100% accurate,
and they are, you can check it out. No one's ever sued me.
Then why do they not agree with the average complication rates and death rates of abortion complications?
Because
why do they seem so...
They're not reported. I told you that. There's no code for them. They're not reported. They're reported as complications of birth, not abortion, because there's no code for insurance to pay for them. And when that woman goes to the hospital, the insurance pays. The emergency Medicaid picks it up, so they have to have a code, and they can't code it under abortion because there's no code, so they code it under maternal health birth complications.
That's a claim I'd like a citation for, and I will post the results on my blog.
Well, I'm not going to read your blog, so I'll give you my email and ask you to email me, please.
Okay.
And I also...
I'm asking the questions.
Okay, I'm ready. I'm going to get what I want to say in.
Okay. You say that life begins at conception, and God has a purpose for everyone at conception. Then what about all the fertilized ovum that are miscarried? 30 to 40% of women miscarry. Some are unaware and some are aware. What about the ones that never implant, never develop into a fully formed human being? What was their purpose?
That's God's business, not mine.
Okay. So God, if you were God...
I'm not God. And I'm not going to get in his way anymore. I did it once and it was terrible. I'm not going back there.
I wouldn't worship a God that I was afraid of to get in their way.
I reverence my God. I respect my God, and I love my God, for he rescued me from a horrible life.
There are women who abortion rescued from a life of poverty, or perhaps an abusive spouse, or delivering the child of someone who raped them, or incest. So for them, it's still, they're rescued regardless. Do you have compassion for these women that risk complications from pregnancy, even if they chose to adopt the child, which you've given birth? It is not a walk in the park. Do you have compassion for these women?
I have compassion for women who place for adoption, and I have compassion for those women who choose abortion. I spend a lot of my time working with them. I work with them every day, but I will tell you this, I have never seen anyone helped by killing a human being, including their own baby. The women I see who've had abortions struggle with what they did. They struggle with their own decision. And even last night, I heard a woman say, I did not know until it was over that I was killing a baby, but I instantly knew it. It was an instinct. So I believe we need to be there for women no matter what. And we certainly are not going to punish them with any kind of penalty. But I don't believe they help themselves or anyone else by taking the life of their baby.
What about the women who are relieved that they had an abortion?
The women that came into our clinic that weren't pregnant?
That relieved that they had an abortion because they were out of the bind that a lot of women are in.
That's an instant instinct, because that's the first thing. But then the next, after relief, comes denial. I did not kill my baby. Oh, I can't ever tell anyone. And that's when the self-punishment comes in, the self-destructive tendencies, until we finally admit that we killed our baby and start the grieving healing process.
You state that they're killing a baby, and also that is a human being. But as we know, 89% of abortions occur in the first trimester, and less than 1% occur after 20 weeks. How can you call a fetus that is not fully developed a human being?
You have 3 children. Did they turn to frogs? No, they didn't. They're human beings. A fetus is little one. It's a little human, a little mammal. You look it up in the dictionary. It's simply fetus is a little human being. It's an unborn child. And we know that those 46 chromosomes come together. The 23 chromosomes and the 23 chromosomes of the pairs come together to make 46 chromosomes, that unique human being, and that is at the moment of conception.
I have 3 children, yes, and they are of the Homo sapiens species. It's true. I grant you that.
2 minutes.
I grant you that.
Turn to dogs or
But,
frogs.
however, part of being a human being and not being a dog or frog is higher cognitive function than other species. And can you say that that is happening in a fetus under 20 weeks?
Some babies live under 20 weeks. Did you know that? There are babies right here that lived at Baylor Hospital under 20 weeks now.
That's not answering the question.
Well, I believe it's a life, and I believe life begins at conception, and I do not believe that we can certainly say no. But the truth of the matter is, your question is, are they dependent on us? Yes, they are. But do you know what? I'm dependent on people today. I need people today, and I think we all need people, and I think that's just part of the unique quality of a woman. No man can have a baby. A transgender man is going to have a tough time having a baby, even if he has a uterus. But let me tell you what, God ordained women to give life, and that's what we're all about. And that's what our bodies are for. And I think we know and you conceived. When you conceive, you know it's a baby. You don't say, oh, my fetus. You say, my baby.
Okay. Now, you're making a claim that it's a baby, and that you're saying that the baby's dependent on us to carry it. Let's talk about a fully formed child. If that child needs a kidney transplant, should the woman be compelled to give that child a kidney so it can live? Should we make laws like that?
Oh, come on. That's nothing. This debate is not about that. Let me tell you something. I would worry about a mother that did not want to do everything she could to save her child's life. But that's not what this debate is about today.
Would you make a law that said that she was forced to do that?
I'm not going to qualify that or dignify that with an answer. It's not pertinent to this conversation.
But you're telling all of us that we should force women to give birth to by law.
I want you to know that in the 4,000 pregnancy centers of this nation, and 183 in Texas, women are not coerced into giving birth. Women are told the truth, and that we are there for them all the way through the pregnancy and beyond. Our goal is to help her with a life of self-sufficiency. But if she walks into an abortion clinic the next day and has an abortion, and this happens, and she comes back to us, we're there to love her and to help her and to walk through whatever grief she's dealing with. We are there for that woman no matter what she chooses, and we do not coerce women into having babies or anything else. And now, I will tell you, I believe the abortion industry is a pretty good coercive place.
This is your group. That's not the reality for millions of people just in Texas that do not have the resources to care and for a child for 18 years, or they're in a very bad situation. So you're saying we should make a law to force these people.
Where did this law thing? I didn't bring up laws. Why are you bringing up laws?
We're talking about the legality of abortion, aren't we?
Well, we've gotten way off of that already, and I'm not talking about making laws.
Let's go ahead and break there.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you to Lilandra Raw and Carol Everett.
I read your obituary for breakfast this morning. As I sat staring at the biography of your years, I couldn't help but to see what was missing. The day you were born and the night your brown body became a corpse were the only times I've seen you be selfless. In between, you lived a musical life, one that sounded of an alphabetical orchestra. Your favorite song was the letter U. I was your daughter. They didn't tell the truth in your obituary, Daddy. They left out some things that I want to share. If they haven't already seen the forgotten pieces shivering in my eyes, your eyes are mine. I see you when the mirror decides to hang your self-portrait on my bathroom walls. Why didn't they tell of how much you love playing games, Father? I promise you were the best player at hide-and-go-seek that I've ever seen. Tattletelling your little ones that you will come see them tomorrow. Playing double dutch with our emotions. There was a dice game in your eyes, and you died in mine every time my tomorrow became a lucky 7 games of peekaboo that only you won at. I quit a long time ago. Why didn't they mention the day that we stood face to face, child to parent, father speaks, I love you, but if you or your siblings never wanted to speak to me again, I wouldn't care. Daughter hears the crackling of fire laughing in her heart, burning away any forest of trust I could ever have for a man. I saw honesty in your eyes at that moment, and it scared the vulnerability out of me. Why didn't they mention how much you love swimming, Father? I would have asked if you could hear the ocean behind my sarcasm. Smell the sandstorm in my skin. I have spent years swallowing every hourglass I can find, attempting to steal back the time that we had that was drowned in your selfish shark-infested seas a week before your obituary was written. I received a text from a friend that read, "Sorry about your dad." What a comical way to find out that your father is gone. The night that motorcycle flung your soul into eternity, I knew your death wouldn't be too hard to get used to, seeing that you were a deadbeat my entire life. So let's start over, Daddy. I will rewrite your obituary for you. Make a metaphor of your life. The daughter that you gave your genes away to but could never seem to fit inside of your pockets grew up to be a poet. She shreds mics open and makes dead things come to life for a living. Only if you could live twice, you would have been the double entendre I can never write. So let's just write about how good you were to me. How you told me I was beautiful, so I didn't have to murder my integrity to resurrect my dying self-esteem. Held your daughter to your chest till she heard your heart split itself into a lifetime of I love yous that choked out her addiction to affirmation from other fatherless fiends. Daddy, I would tell them how you made me feel worth it, so I never had to buy back my soul from bankrupt sheets belonging to little boys that were too poor to purchase my body with a bended knee. Daddy, I would chisel into the dashes of your death dates how you kept every promise that crawled out of your hands and into my memory, so it was easy for me to believe that my Father in heaven isn't a liar like my daddy on earth. We cannot forget to tell them how you lived to walk your daughter down the aisle, look her husband in the face and say, "It is I, her protector, her provider, her father, who gives her to you to do the same." See, Daddy, you have a brand new obituary now. The old one wasn't honest enough, and now neither is your daughter.
All right, if you have a question for Carol, please line up at this microphone following Dr. Zach. If you have a question for Lilandra, please line up at that microphone over there. We will rotate, question here, question there, questions submitted online by our very kind and loving live stream audience. And we will start here. Dr. Zach, 2 minutes.
Ms. Everett, thanks for being here. It's great to listen to your presentation and Lilandra's as well. I'm wondering if I could probe you on one issue that Lilandra brought up that I don't think was covered in the cross-exam. So Lilandra had brought up that in the scriptures, God seems to have a very low regard for the health and safety of children. So there are several instances where little children are killed. At the command of God. There's a very kind of disturbing psalm. You mentioned some of the verses in the Psalms. In Psalm 137 it says, "Blessed is he who takes their little ones and dashes them against the rock." And I'm wondering if you could maybe give some of your opinion about the infanticide that we see in the scriptures.
Well, I'm not theologically trained, first of all. I only know what I've learned, and I believe that God says that children are a blessing and that our quiver should be full of them. And, you know, quite frankly, I can't help it. I've just got to say this. I believe the pro-lifers are winning because we're the only side having babies. But I think if you go on, and the scripture is very clear that Jesus says, "Suffer the little children, come to me." And there's so many scriptures that just mention how he loves children. And I know that there are, they're talking about Molech and other things in scripture, but you'd really need a pastor to answer that rather than me.
Okay, thank you.
Question from Lilandra.
My question is, you seem to be very scientifically knowledgeable, and if that being said, I'm sure you know about meiosis and mitosis, and when you have sexual interaction, that creates a baby potentially. So how can you say if there's a cause and effect, and the effect of having sex is a baby, how can you separate those two? If you choose the behavior, you also have to choose the consequence. You can't say down the road, "Oh, I didn't mean to do that."
Do you use contraception?
That's none of your business, but no.
Okay, so then you're choosing to have a baby every time you have intercourse?
Absolutely. You having the scientific knowledge that you have to know that that's the interaction. If you choose the behavior, you choose the consequence.
Would you recommend everybody have a baby every time they have intercourse? Not every time, but as a result of their intercourse? Do you recommend that lifestyle for everybody?
I think everybody can choose their own behavior, and I think everybody can choose their own consequences, but there's natural consequences and there's consequences you bring on yourself. And if you choose to have sex, you have to know that having a baby is a potential consequence of that behavior. There's nothing that you can do about it. Science proves that having sex can potentially cause a baby.
I support your choice to have children as a result of having intercourse. That's what choice means, that you don't have to have an abortion if you don't choose to. So, but other people, I also support their choices to have as many children as they can afford. I mean, you're talking about consequences. How about a whole quiver full of children? There are some consequences.
If you don't have the necessities to provide for a baby, then maybe you shouldn't be having sex all the time if it's a natural consequence. Or maybe you should choose adoption.
I don't know that many people that can provide for a baby as a natural effect of having intercourse. Like if you were to have over 3 children, so are we saying that people should just abstain from sex and just have those amount that they can afford, maybe stop at 2 or 3 and never have sex with their spouse again?
That's up to you, and you can choose whatever you want, but there's things that you can do to prevent that, and you have to know that when you have sex, you also are choosing to have a baby. That doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it's potentially going to happen, and you have to be prepared for that.
This is another fact of science. It's not a pretty fact. It's kind of cruel. Humans are basically start falling apart after their childbearing age. They get genetic disorders. As far as science works, without medical help, most people are not going to have a quiver full of children. Most people are going to die. The death rate was much higher without science. So why not also accept the help of science with family planning?
Okay, question online from Nolan. Question from Lilandra. Unsafe abortion arguments only work if one assumes that their unborn is not a human. If they're members of the human community, your arguments simply don't work. They're circular. If the unborn are members of the human community, there's no such thing as a, quote, safe abortion. How can you assume that the unborn are not members of the human community when geneticists like Jerome Lejeune say, quote, to accept the fact that after fertilization has taken place, a new human has come into being is no longer a matter of taste or opinion. The human nature of the human being from conception to old age is not a metaphysical contention. It is plain experimental evidence.
egg is fertilized in conception, that fertilized egg has human cells. But going forward and saying that that's a human being, when we know human beings and in the human community that you're speaking of have certain characteristics and traits that fetuses don't. So I don't accept the conclusion that a fertilized egg from conception is a human being.
Question for Carol?
Yes, now that you're a truth speaker and you've heard the data that the videos about the kicking baby and all of that were actually fraudulent, will we not hear that cited by you again?
No, as a matter of fact, I have access to those, as you do, and I do a lot of interviews, and every interview I've ever done has been edited. And so those videos were edited not to exclude truth, but to exclude greetings and other things. And so please look at those and please watch those, because they've been verified by the Alliance Defending Freedom, who actually had those videos looked at, and they proved that they were not edited.
The videos that were proved to be edited,
they were proved to be
studies?
Truthful, and they were only edited to take out the greetings and other things.
So
the content is true.
So you're saying here now that the video that was already judged to be fraudulent about the kicking baby that was actually a stillbirth?
It's not only judged to be fraudulent by Planned Parenthood.
Okay.
Yes, and you know, we've always understood that when you say something enough, that many people believe it, and we know that Planned Parenthood lies. We've watched them lie about other things, and what did we expect them to say? Oh, yes, we're really doing that? Well, Cecile Richards pretty much admitted it several times, and she has apologized for them. Why would she apologize for them if they weren't true?
Okay, on that, whether it's been edited or not, the people that made the video admitted that was a video of a stillbirth. Not just Planned Parenthood saying.
I'm not sure that I know what you're talking about then, because I talked to them today, and that is not what we were talking about. But I'll ask about that.
Okay.
Because I'll be meeting with them next week.
All right.
Question for Lilandra?
Yeah, Lilandra, thanks for coming out and having the courage to get on stage.
Okay.
My question was, you brought up kind of the equivalence of we don't require people to give a kidney to save their parent's life. So why should we require, a mother to give birth to a baby she doesn't want? So that brings up an issue of bioethics. Do you see there being an equivalency between letting die and withholding care?
Letting die and withholding care. Are you saying that? Are you talking about adults or children who are born who you're withholding care from or letting die? You're not talking about abortion, right?
No, just kind of in general, where you have a patient that you withhold care from and let them die, which would be, the instance of the donating the kidney, and then an actively killing.
Is there a difference between withholding your kidney if it would save somebody's life and actively killing? Yes. Yes, there is. It's not a choice I would make to withhold my kidney from my child, but I don't think that we can legislate people to donate their organs or part of themselves, or to host something inside of themselves that a lot of times causes damage and death. That's my opinion, ethically speaking.
Euthanasia is certainly being discussed in our legislature, and there were laws passed even this last legislative session to protect the elderly and infirm.
Thank you.
But no one is requiring a law to make another human being sustain another.
Question online for Lilandra from Conway. How does legalization itself cause abortion to be safer for women when there are fewer regulations on abortion clinics than any other medical facility?
I would have to say from what I've seen, there are actually more regulations on abortion clinics than any other facility. And because we've just passed House Bill 2, adding more regulations to abortion facilities. And how can I say that it's safer? Was the other part of the question? To have, the other part of the question was, how can I say
The other part of the question was...
Oh, it's not safer because it's not, the abortion industry is not regulated. That was the question?
Question again, I'm sorry. How does legalization itself cause abortion to be safer for women when there are fewer regulations on abortion clinics than any other medical facility?
I would have to say that is not true. We pass more, we submit more bills in Texas, over 200 of them, to regulate abortion. And how many do we do? How many bills do we submit to regulate guns?
To regulate what?
Guns. Well, and what the government should be doing, keeping us safe.
Well, first of all, Texas recognizes the Second Amendment, and we are probably not going to legalize guns. But let's go back to this and let's just talk about why the abortion industry is not regulated. We really need to think through this. First of all, when abortion happened, when abortion was regulated in 1973, there was no right to it was a right to privacy to choose abortion, not a right to kill. And so it was not a medical ruling at all. And so abortion clinics fell outside of the policies of all other standard medical facilities. Why did they do that? Because it's an all-cash business, and because abortionists they'll take your credit card now, but they don't want your insurance. And so the standard for all other medical facilities, any ambulatory surgical facility, anything performing surgery, even doctors' offices, in order to collect insurance, must meet the Medicare standards. That's the standard for every medical procedure across the nation. And then all of the other insurance that we have on ourselves falls under that. Medicaid falls under it, Blue Cross Blue Shield falls under it, Humana, Aetna, and everything. Abortion clinics never met that standard because it was an all-cash business. So what happened, because they fell outside, it was a privacy issue, nobody regulated them. They operated clinics without running water, they operated clinics without hot water, they operated clinics where they didn't sterilize instruments. And so the reason that Texas led the pack in regulating abortion clinics is because the abortion industry has not regulated itself since 1973. And finally, because the proof was that women were dying in abortion clinics only because of unsterilized instruments and other things that came to actually the Health and Human Services Commission in Texas is one of the places that found all these things that were going on in the abortion clinics, and that's why Texas passed HB 2 to regulate it according to the same standards as any other ambulatory surgical facility. That the doctors finally, for the first time, must have admitting privileges at a hospital within 30 miles of the abortion facility. Now, you know, my mother had surgery, and that doctor did the surgery on her and had admitting privileges just 5 blocks away. That RU-486, the abortion drug, must be given according to the Federal Drug Administration standards. When you take a birth control pill or anything else, even an antibiotic, don't you want it administered according to the Federal Drug Administration standards? Yet they were letting someone that sat at the front desk do the abortion drug. Now it must be given by a physician. And of course, then the 20-week ban that you can't do abortions in Texas over 20 weeks. Simple regulations to protect the health of women choosing abortions, not the pro-life. Wait a minute. I'm anti-choice. I forgot. The anti-choicers.
Question
this was
for
protecting the women.
My question is, when in the main part of the debate, you were mentioning how Jesus brought you to where your position now.
Yes.
Were you intending to go anywhere with that, or is that just or is that simply meant as an explanation for how you?
Let me tell you about what happened to me. I was in the abortion business, and we were going to expand. We needed to do 40,000 abortions a year for me to be a millionaire. We had incredible problems. We had 2 abortion clinics open at the time, and I had managed 2 others, and I was a third partner in these 2. And we needed to open 3 more in the next year. They would pay for themselves in the first month, and then they were just cash cows after that. But we called in a business counselor who was to help us with our problems, our internal problems, so we could expand. And he made us agree to meet with him an hour a week for 4 weeks. Very strange man, wouldn't talk about money, Wouldn't talk about anything. You know, he just said, okay, let's just meet for 4 weeks. So we started meeting, and the first week he interviewed me, and the second week I interviewed him. He didn't drink, he didn't cuss, he didn't chew, he didn't run around on his wife. He didn't fit in my world. So I said, what in the world are you doing here? Are you a preacher? And he said, yes. And I said, you know, I thought, you've got to be crazy. I told him quickly, I'm a Christian. I'm a Christian. I have a Bible in the top right-hand drawer of my desk. I pray every day. I didn't tell him that I prayed none of those women would die, and I prayed there'd be a lot of abortions today. But when I told that man I tithed on all that money and he wasn't impacted, I knew I was in trouble. And then he just calmly told the story. He said, Carol, my deacons and I have been praying for some time. We believe there's someone in this abortion clinic that God wants out. We're going to be leaving in 30 days. And he said, I wouldn't be much of a salesman if I didn't ask you if you wanted to pray that prayer and ask Jesus Christ to come into your life. I want you to hear this prayer I prayed because it's really kind of funny. He is the king of the weird prayer. But he said, I'm going to pray this and you pray it after me. Dear God, I am a sinner. Please forgive me of my sins. Thank you for sending your son, Jesus Christ, to die on the cross for my sins. Reign on the throne of my heart as Lord and Savior. Make me a worker in your vineyard. Amen. I stood up. I prayed that prayer. I shook his hand and I laughed. And I laughed all the way back to the abortion clinic. Did this crazy man really think I was going to leave all this money and go to Florida to work in a vineyard? Not me. I'll stay right here. Thank you very much. But when I got back to that abortion clinic that day, those girls were all crying. They were all huddled over to the right. I'm sure they'd done it before, but I'd never seen them before. I started taking them in my office and sitting down knee to knee, eye to eye. Now, you've got to remember, I was the hammer. If they couldn't sell a girl on an abortion, they brought her to me. I scared her to death. We got her money and pushed her through. But I started saying, you don't have to have an abortion. And at the end of that day, I was not saying, isn't this great? I saved 3 babies. I was saying, I lost $75. And I fell to my knees from the floor of that abortion clinic and prayed a heart prayer. Lord, if there is a Lord, if this is not where you want me, hit me over the head with a 2x4. I didn't know he had one, but he did. And the 2x4 was that we were caught attempting to do abortions on women that were not pregnant by Channel 4 here in this area. They sent their reporters to the doctor to be certain they weren't pregnant. They wired them for sound, sent them in our abortion clinic, caught us red-handed, and aired that special 27 days after that pastor said someone would be leaving in 30 days. And all I knew was I couldn't do it. I didn't want to be in that clinic while they did one more abortion. And I left. July the 27th, 1983. I never intended to be a pro-lifer. But I had to tell this story. As only God can, he brought me to the point of telling this story. And I'm going to keep telling it as long as he asks me to.
So I understand that God was part of, like, driving force for you to leave your abortion business. Is that right?
Yes. The truth was I saw that we were maiming or killing women. 1 a month. And then when we were caught doing abortions on women that weren't pregnant, I couldn't kid myself. But because Christ came in, I could see that.
I was just wondering if God was a reason for making abortions illegal, or if it was just your personal story.
I can't hear you. You said...
If God was... If you're mentioning God as a reason for making abortions illegal, or if it was just your personal story.
I think I'm called to tell the truth, and people are called to do what they choose to do. But if I had my choice, abortion would be illegal, and we would help every woman through the pregnancy and beyond. But that's not my choice. So I have to be here for the women no matter what they choose. And I think that God would have me love them no matter what they choose. But I'm going to tell the truth, and I want them to know what they're walking into. I had an abortion, and it was the worst decision I ever made in my life, and it's a decision that scarred me for life. I chose to sell other women abortions to try to justify my own. So I'll spend the rest of my life telling the story and helping women with the choice of life physically and eternally.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Question from Lilandra.
Yes, Mrs. Raw and Mrs. Everett, thank you very much for coming out. I appreciate you both. Question for Mrs. Raw. I wanted some clarification to try to understand exactly what is your definition of a human life. And one thing that you've mentioned is higher cognitive reasoning. if that is the only definition, which it very well may not be, if it is, where do infants and people who suffer from mental disability claim? Where do they derive their claim? Pardon me. Where do they derive their claim to humanity?
Okay, well, that's a fair question. I have my oldest son has disability. He has an intellectual disability, and I had to be his guardian his entire life. And if you're going to ask me if he is a human life, yes, he has wants, needs, desires. He can be happy. So for that part of the question, yes. Now, if you're talking about people who are on life support or something like that, or have lost a lot of cognitive function?
Well, I mean, the basic question I'm trying to ask is, what is the definition of a human life? And the points about where do infants and folks suffering from mental disability come is if you only claim that it's higher cognitive function, then in what ways do they display higher cognitive function? But that may not be your answer. It's just a simple question how do you define human life?
Okay, now we're talking about infants. Infants to 2 years of age, at 2 years of age, have higher cognitive functioning than most species of animals. So I would think that they fit the criteria there. They also feel happiness. They want things. They feel anger. They have desires. So they're demonstrating higher cognitive functioning.
Okay. Just to make sure I understand you correctly, is that the only standard by which you define a human life as higher cognitive function?
It's one of the standards. It's like if the way science works, you in order to be classified as a human, you have several criteria, and higher cognitive functioning is one of them.
Okay.
It distinguishes us from other apes.
Okay. Perhaps in your blog, and I don't mean to press you here, you've mentioned that there are other standards as well. I would just be interested to hear what those are. You've said the higher cognitive function is one of them. I'm unsure what the other ones would be, but perhaps with time you could put that in the blog.
Okay. No one of them makes anyone human. All of them together.
Okay.
Bipedal. Humans have hands. They have, I forget what kind of vision it is, but color vision. I forget the science name for it.
Okay.
Trichromatic.
But you have tetrachromats too.
There are people who see more color ranges than other people.
Okay.
But that doesn't mean they ceased being humans. That means that the genes that they had for that mutated.
Okay. All right. Thank you for your time.
Okay.
Question submitted online. Question from Kyle. You say that no one should be able to decide what someone else does with their body. This is for Lilandra. Yet you encourage someone to take every choice a person would ever make by killing that person. You claim that a fetus isn't a person, so why is the murder of a pregnant woman in 38 states viewed as a double homicide?
I'm not sure. I haven't seen those laws, but I would think it would be an aggravated.
Texas has one.
Scott Peterson, apparently in California, was tried for double homicide for killing a pregnant wife.
I understand the reasoning, but I still say that that a fetus is not a person. It's not a fully developed human being, and I still think that is a correct statement. And I think perhaps it should be an aggravated crime to kill or dismember a pregnant person, because even from the perspective of just the woman, that would be quite an ordeal.
Well, and we've had several cases in Texas, and I can't remember all of them, but we've had at least 3 cases where someone was charged with 2 murders for killing the baby and the mother.
Question for
I
Carol?
accept that.
All right. Thank you both. Carol, in your opening statement, you spoke about, and this is just really a question for clarification. You spoke about 90% of women having some sort of emotional trauma, and then later in the debate you said after relief comes denial. I'm just curious if you think there's even been one case, or if there are regular occurrences of women who do have abortions and then don't regret it, or don't have a iterative step of denial and then guilt, etc.
Well, we know over 90% have post-traumatic stress disorder, so there's 10% that I don't know about. And I've never met one. I did meet one whose hand I held during abortion who told me it was the best thing that ever happened to her, but she was pretty angry, so I wondered about her. So I'm sure that's a possibility, but right. I don't meet them in my work.
And that was the reason I asked, just because it seemed during the debate that you seemed to eliminate that as a possibility.
No, 90%. The Elliott Institute has several studies that show over 90% of women who have abortions have post-traumatic stress disorder. Okay. So there's another 10% out there.
Right.
The American Psychological Association did a study of this, and that 90% figure, it's not.
Question for Lilandra from Dave.
I hold the substance view of personhood that regardless of one's size or level of development or environment, degree of dependency, that all humans are persons. Now, the leading defenders of abortion, the philosophers, all agree on the scientific facts. Let me quote Peter Singer to lead up to my question. Whether a being is a member of a given species is something that can be determined scientifically by an examination of the nature of the chromosomes in the cells and the living organisms. In this sense, there is no doubt that from the first moments of its existence, an embryo conceived from a human sperm and egg is a human being. Now, for example, other defenders of abortion, Judith Jarvis Thompson, in the beginning of the violin analogy, says, I'm inclined to think also that we should probably have to agree that the fetus has already become a person before birth. My question is this. Singer acknowledges from a historical standpoint that it was Christians in the first century that did away with the practices of Roman infanticide that was inspired by the Greeks. That these Christians took seriously the words of Jesus who said, let the little children come unto me. And if anyone causes one of these children who believe in me to suffer, it'd be better for him to have a millstone hung around his neck. Now, Peter Singer says it was a common practice of infanticide, but if we read the readings of like Tertullian and others, it was Christians who said, we need to stop that. You mentioned the 2-year mark. Singer affirms that infanticide was morally permissible for centuries amongst the Greeks and the Romans. Here's my question, 2 parts here. One is, would it be morally permissible if the majority of women in America changed their mind, say 20 years from now, and they wanted infanticide up to 2 years? Would you agree that that would be a legal moral right? That's my first question. The second is this. If personhood is grounded in certain particular functions, but those functions are disagreed amongst defenders of abortion, whether that's Warren who disagrees with Tooley or Tooley who disagrees with Singer, how do you have knowledge that personhood is grounded in those particular functions? There's my two-part question.
Okay, the first question, if women decided in the future that infanticide up to 2 years was a legal right, would you say that's morally acceptable? I would like to think that we have advanced from Roman society and even Christian society that decided that you can't kill an infant. I think I remember that from the Bible. But they meant their own, right? But other infants of enemies possibly dash them against the walls. You know, so you don't go by that anymore. If you receive that kind of commandment, or from your preacher who said it came from God.
The Bible not everything that is descriptive in the text of the Bible is prescriptive. The Bible may descript, there's a variety of languages. The Bible has a high view of children that and I didn't ask this from a religious standpoint, from a historical standpoint. It was Peter Singer acknowledging that the Christians, based on their view of the Hebrew, and even Josephus talks about how, from a Jewish standpoint, that abortion was murder. I mean, that's from Josephus. Who's not, so that was the worldview of the Hebrew, worldview. So my question is this: if the majority of people say, "Hey, look, this 1-year-old does not have the levels of consciousness as a 14-year-old," and women want to bring back that practice, like Peter Singer, who teaches at Princeton, a very educated man, would you be in favor of that?
I don't think the science is behind that claim, and I don't think that even if there were a large movement of people trying to do that it could pass muster to being a law. Okay. And I don't think and to answer your question, I don't think it's ethical to kill infants.
Okay, and so this brings to the second question of moral grounding and personhood. Those who hold that personhood is based on particular functions, some on levels of consciousness, some on, on certain levels of activity or desires. Now, there's some religions, for example, I'm not a Buddhist, but some Buddhists say we need to remove desire, okay? And then when others go into like a coma, they lose certain desires. So what is the moral grounding from a scientific standpoint, okay? That we have it, because I would say it's a philosophical answer. What's the moral grounding for this function, the functional view of personhood? If saying
that they need to remove desire, then that's an admission that they have it, if they have it to remove it, right?
Well, the question would be is how do you ground personhood in this function, and how do you have knowledge that it's in this particular function of consciousness?
There's medical science, of course, on this. This is investigated thoroughly because of the objections to abortion.
We both agree from a medical standpoint that people's consciousness vary. It comes and goes, and some members of the species Homo sapiens lack that consciousness. Now, from a philosophical or an ethical standpoint, those in favor of abortion choice disagree on what functionality that is. Why do you say that the moral responsibility lies in consciousness?
Because that's what makes a human being,
right?
And not a frog or a dog, like Carol said.
So, for example, mention a dog.
Dogs do have.
If a dog, let's take a dog is lacking some particular function. Does that, like a dog that can't bark, does that mean that that's not a dog?
He had that. If he was born without it, there's some kind of genetic mutation, right? So it's like snakes once in their evolutionary history had legs. That doesn't mean they're not still lizards. Just because you've evolved and have certain mutations, doesn't mean you grow out of what you were.
Okay. Thank you.
Question online for Carol. Submitted from Troy. You keep citing God in your reasoning for why abortion should be illegal. Considering the separation of church and state, why should your personal religious views have any bearing on the reproductive rights of other women?
Goodness gracious. I wish that my views did have bearing on the rights of other women, but they really don't. Quite frankly, I will tell people the truth, but I have women that choose abortion after I talk to them, so I can hardly say that my religious views really affect other people. I'd like for them to.
Now, while you had suggested that the vast majority of the people that came for abortions, and in your treatise you said that there were no exceptions for anybody that ever showed up as a rape victim.
Wait a minute. I said there were no exceptions to something happened outside. I didn't hear you.
You said that nobody showed up as a result of rape, that the vast majority of the people that showed up, or the entirety of the people that showed up for abortions, were actually just as a matter of convenience.
35,000 abortions, not one of them was for rape.
Right. Given that, even if we assume that, the reason that we have to have legislation removed, I would say, in my question, is for the reason that there are extenuating circumstances. There are judgments that need to be made that cannot be left to a judge to decide on some later date, because these things have to be done early on, because the later you wait, the further the complications are. So when you get into a situation like Mike Huckabee recently commented on, about a 10-year-old rape victim who he says should be forced to carry that baby to term, even though it is unsafe both for the baby and the mother. And in other situations when a baby is born with a brainstem but no brain. And we know that the complications are only going to increase if that young mother carries that baby to term. Are there no exceptions for when an abortion is the ethical choice?
Abortions have always been available through a committee of doctors at every hospital in this nation. Long before Roe v. Wade, they had committees set up. So if some exception came in, 3 doctors got together and they decided if they were going to allow that exception, and that has not changed ever. So in case of an exception, the judge does not necessarily make the decision. The medical teams make decisions if the people apply to the proper places. So laws don't have quite as much bearing on a medical procedure as we seem to think here tonight.
How long does that take?
A very short period of time. You have to get 3 doctors together, just a few days or maybe less. Okay. Depends on how long it takes to convene the committee. Okay. And a lot of that depends on the doctor that you're using to call the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Question for...
Go ahead.
No, please.
I would just add that if you're saying laws don't have the effect that we think they do, if Mike Huckabee is calling for a new law that says that women should attempt to give birth even though their life is threatened, then these physician committees, which I've read about too, would have to follow the law. The new law. No,
they do not. A physician committee, a medical committee, has the ability to designate whatever, if they surgery or whatever procedure they deem necessary for the health of that woman, and it circumvents the laws.
That's not what Mike wants, though, Mr.
Well,
Huckabee
I'm not talking about Mike Huckabee, and I didn't hear what he said, so I really don't know what you're talking about. But we have another question.
Question from the floor.
Okay, Mrs. Raw. Mrs. Everett, thank you again for coming. My question is for you, Mrs. Raw. It's just more of a clarification on a comment that you made at the beginning of your first talk in responding to Mrs. Everett's use of Scripture, but for specifically her use of the Psalms. You mentioned that the Bible contradicts itself when referring to when life begins. You said something to the effect of the Bible saying God breathed life into humans, and then I think you compared that to how Mrs. Everett was talking about how the Psalms say something different about, and just how those passages don't line up together and that they contradict each other. I just wanted to press you a little bit more on that comment. Can you list the specific passages that you're talking to with chapter and verse?
I can.
Well, the question's not for you, sir. I'll get to that in a sec. Okay, so can you list a specific chapter and verse that you're referring to? If those passages that you're referring to are from different genres, the exact statement doesn't need to be replicated, word by word. For example, I can use metaphorical languages that uses symbolism, terseness, imagery, when I'm referring to poetry, but when I'm referring to like prose narrative, I just want to give you the simple facts. I just want to tell you straightforward, this is what it is. So that's the first thing was, what is the specific passages that you're talking about? And if those passages that you're talking about, can you explain your hermeneutic and how you interpret genre and how that plays into how you see there being a contradiction there? Thanks.
Granted, some things such as Psalms that we were just talking about that are poetry can be reinterpreted metaphorically. Exactly. But that goes, then how do you apply to Psalms that if he's saying that you're fearfully and wonderfully made, that isn't some sort of figurative language? And also, where did I get that life begins at birth? Birth. And that's when the soul is breathed into body. I believe that's from the Talmud. I don't know the exact.
There's also a passage in the Bible that mentions that when he received the breath of life, he was infused with the Spirit and became a living soul.
So Genesis 2 is what you're referring to.
That and also.
What's the psalm that you're referring to? I'm just trying to clarify.
The psalm that she referred to was the one about being fearfully and wonderfully made. There's also
139.
Another verse that he knew whoever in the womb. That one too. So I'm just saying they're contradictory, and whether they're metaphorical or not, it still goes to the point that there's a contradiction in the Jewish, in my opinion, mythology about when life begins.
Okay, I guess I'm still a little bit confused because when we're talking about hermeneutics, I don't necessarily. I don't necessarily have to be able to say exactly the same thing that I said in the Psalms that I said in Genesis 2. And I'm not even talking about the Talmud. I'm just asking specifically about Scripture. Why does it matter if I describe it in one way in this place, and I just state it another? I state it simply in another place. I'm still not seeing the phrases that you're talking about.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just asking you to be more specific.
Well, fair enough. But if you're stating it in one place, and you're stating it another way in another place in the Bible, but if those two statements disagree about when life begins, that sets up a contradiction. That's the point I'm making. And either one could be entirely metaphorical.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate it. Thank you.
Okay.
Question online for Carol.
Thank you.
Submitted by Philip. Carol, you claim that you're not here to talk about laws. That being the case, irrespective of your personal stance on abortion, do you then concede that a woman's right to an abortion should remain legal?
No, I do not. I think that it's just like we don't take our children out, get them really good and drunk, and try to teach them how to drive safely drunk. If you have a moral absolute, we're giving a moral absolute, and I believe that the country should honor Scripture because that's my belief system. And I believe that when we illegalize abortion, there'll be fewer and fewer abortions. Exactly. Let's just look what we did when we cleaned up the abortion industry and 28 of them closed. 40,000 more women chose life. Abortion dropped by about 50% in the state of Texas because those women were going to truth-telling centers, pregnancy centers, where they were hearing the truth. I believe women deserve the truth, and they're not getting the truth in the abortion industry today. And we need to have a standard, and I'd love to see abortion illegal. I don't think that'll happen, but I would love to see it.
I believe also in Texas, the unintended pregnancy rate went down when more districts decided, when they were given the choice of whether to choose abstinence only or comprehensive, that sex education. So the number in pregnancies dropping, you really have to desegregate that data over what was causing that.
Well, and you even have to consider the 1,200 to 1,500 people every day moving into Texas for the last 3 years. So there's so many things that come into play here.
Whoa, too close. I can't help but draw the parallels between conception and end of life, and I know we alluded to this in some other questions, but how can we make the distinction at, say, conception and cells coming together and then making the assumptions from there on what is right and wrong, but then we have say a brain-dead individual who's on life support, or maybe not, but how can we make the decision? It just doesn't seem as big of a deal, when we remove someone off life support or we end their life due to their mental state, when it seems at least the potential for life is greater in that body or that mass of cells at that point.
Well, you have to remember that those people who are removed from life support are removed by a doctor and their family. They're not just taken off because their mental health is bad. Their health is bad. Their physical health is bad. And when their brain stops, when there's no brain wave or when there's not a heartbeat, they're technically dead. Yet here we have an individual in the womb that by the time the woman knows she's pregnant, by the time she knows she's pregnant, by the time she's missed a period, That baby has a heartbeat and has brainwaves just a few weeks later. So that is a human being.
It seems like
actually, even at 10 weeks, the baby responds to pain. So,
right. Well, and bodies can still respond instinctively and from the nervous system, but it seems like both are relying on hope of what this person could be, and that's what makes it so difficult to remove someone off life support.
well, it is difficult, and
Right.
I don't want to face that, quite frankly.
Right, and so I just don't necessarily see the clear distinction between the two when because it's so difficult to remove someone from life support. You know that people do come back. People wake up. And so it still seems what's the difference? Why not wait it out? Let them die naturally. Then I'm just curious why people aren't up in arms.
You're
over
talking
the same
about
thing.
euthanasia, right? You're not talking about abortion, right?
I'm just looking at the parallels between
Okay, well, the
two.
end-of-life issue is being dealt with, and it is a very difficult issue, but I decided...
I'm not talking about euthanasia. I see what you're asking.
Yeah, I decided I was never going to get into the end-of-life issues until I finished my job with life.
Right. No, I don't want to get in the euthanasia thing. I'm talking about if someone's on life support or if someone is being sustained or whatever you want to call it, and then someone has to make their caretaker or whoever's responsible for that decision has to make the decision to remove that potential for life from their person, and so they're still considered an individual. You still refer to them by name. Of course, we do that after the death, so it's not really relevant. But I just can't help but draw the parallels, and I was just curious your stance on that. And I feel like you've answered it, so it's not.
Well, the parallel is when a baby is conceived, there is great hope. And there is certainly the potential for a great life.
And that's what I was saying. There's
and
hope
we are,
in both,
yes,
right?
Yes, and it's not our job to take that life.
Yes, I want to say, first of all, I am well past my childbearing years, and I have all my faculties, and I can think, and I can do, and I can manage. I'm still here. Second, I want to mention that it needs to be said the Guttmacher Institute you referred to is the Alan Guttmacher Institute. That is the research arm of Planned Parenthood. That is their own research arm, and that was not said. And also, deaths from abortion are grossly underreported. They're falsely reported because a uterus can be perforated and they will put the cause of death, bled to death. So there's no way to tell, but you can look at safeandlegal.com. I got sick of counting the dead women from abortion at 442, and they are all heavily and well documented why they died. They went to the hospital after having an abortion. Their cause of death might be bleeding to death, but their uterus was probably perforated or some of the baby was left inside. Also, I want to say that before I had an abortion, I never said the word, didn't care about it one way or the other. Once I had one, because no one told me what was really going on there, that this is a boy, his arms and legs are moving, his heart is beating, feels pain, responds to touch. Nobody told me that. And in the death camp where I went, my counseling was cash, MasterCard, or Visa. And that's what they cared about. They didn't care about me, and they sure didn't care about my child, and that was clear. And after I was post-abortive, I became violently pro-choice. Who are you to take my right away to abort a child? When before, I didn't care one way or another, but I had to justify it. Since I learned what I did by seeing a sonogram of an actual abortion where the baby is clearly at 12 weeks conception trying to get away from the suction device, and which, by the way, when the abortionist saw that video, he put his instruments down and never did another abortion. I had to reckon with myself, and this secret that I had for 15 years, I began to tell because I wanted women to know the truth, that what they're doing, an abortion, is not the answer to their problem. It makes whatever problem they think they have much, much worse. Since then, I've gone on to counsel post-abortive women by the hundreds, and I mean hundreds over the years. Almost all of them wanted to die themselves when they realized what they've done. I have never, ever spoken to a woman that has given birth that wants to die because they gave birth. And abortion is a scourge on our country, and it is horrific. And I am guessing that you must keep telling yourself that you can't say it's a child, because then all of your arguments would go poof. So you have to keep telling yourself it's not a fetus or a child or a human or anything else. But when two humans have sex and fertilization occurs, there is a human then. It's not a basket or a frog or a puppy. It is another human being with a right to life. So I just want to make some statements. Thank you for all you do.
Thank you. I know that was difficult. Thank you.
Okay. I'm aware that there's challenges to the data of the Guttmacher Institute on deaths and complications from abortion. However, unlike a lot of the claims that you just made, and you made several of them, whatever data the Guttmacher Institute publishes is peer-reviewed. So what that means is peer review is a scientific process where they publish their findings, and academics and scientists check their numbers. And there have been people checking the numbers that they're talking about, and they've withstood scrutiny.
I think, first of all, we need to respect your feelings for coming forward. Thank you very much for sharing your feelings. I know that's not easy. And the second thing we need to recognize is the peer review for the Guttmacher Institute is another bunch of abortionists, for that is the abortionist reporting arm, and their peer reviews are all abortionists and like-minded people, and they are not reviewed by people who are pro-life or outside the abortion industry at all.
You're going to have to give me a citation for that.
Well, let's look at their reviews. They're peer reviewing. They're all pro-abortion.
Well, you just made a claim.
Well, we'll look at it, because I'll be happy to look at it. Because
their data is reviewed by other abortionists.
Yes, it's all abortion
and
industry.
You must be looking at some sort of data that has told you that, and I'd like to see it also.
Well, look at the end of their articles and look at their peer reviews. We'll be happy to do that.
Good.
Question for Lilandra. Every day worldwide, people celebrate the birth of a child with a birthday. Can you provide one example where a feminist celebrates her choice day, celebrating the day she murdered her child? Is Hallmark missing out on a huge market here?
I don't think that's a serious question, so I don't think it merits a serious answer.
I think that's someone who's asking a question that they wonder about. And the answer is no one celebrates the anniversary of their abortion, but women mourn the anniversary of their abortion. We remember the day our baby would have been born, remember the day of our abortion, and we mourn that day.
We're going to let these two go and these two go, and that's in for the floor. Keep your questions very short, please.
Yes, sir. Okay, so we've heard a lot of statistics, which can be very confusing and also not accurate. We've also heard a lot of emotion, a lot of opinions, and we've also heard a lot of religious questions about exegesis of scripture and hermeneutics and things like that, which neither of you claim to be biblical scholars. So can either of you make an argument away without religion and without leaning on might makes right? Can either of you make a logical argument for why abortion should or should not be legal that's not based on statistics or emotional appeal or might makes right?
I think the science is that life begins at conception. Actually, the Supreme Court knew it before 1971, before the ruling in 1973. They were presented biological evidence that life begins at conception. The medical community says life begins at conception.
She was saying, okay, the medical community. It's hard not to make an argument using statistics, because the best reason that I have that abortion should stay legal is wherever it is not legal, there are horrific human consequences to that. And she's saying that it's legal and there's still those types of consequences, but the peer-reviewed data doesn't back that up.
But we know that HB 2 passed, and the majority of abortionists in Texas could not get admitted privileges at a hospital. So we were working with people who did, in some cases, didn't even have a medical license and had been sanctioned by the medical review boards.
You know, there was one other thing I wanted to clarify where I was wrong. We were talking about pregnancies and abortions and whether they're going up or down as a result of HB2 and also crisis pregnancy center counseling. And it is correct, there was a rise in Medicaid births. But there was also, before a lot of this legislation, there was a drop in abortions and unintended pregnancies that saved the state $400 million from comprehensive
we really need
sex
to look.
education.
Now, I know those statistics pretty well, and I really question that.
Question. If abortion is the potential taking of human life, and so considering that, what responsibility does society have to make sure that what is being killed when a woman has an abortion is not human?
Okay, what responsibility does society have to determine whether something during abortion is being murdered because it's human? Is your question?
Yeah, is not human.
Is not human.
Yeah.
I think society has been very responsible with that question. We're still debating it now, and in Congress, where Planned Parenthood is on the chopping block. So people do take that responsibility very seriously. And on the choice side, people do research into fetal development to see that we're not ending a cognizant being, a human being. So those things.
And yet
people
abortions
are
are done.
responsible for it.
Abortions are done through all 9 months of pregnancy, not because of Roe v. Wade, but because of Doe v. Bolton, the companion case of Roe that says for the health of the mother, an abortion can be completed through all 9 months of pregnancy. The abortion industry understands that health encompasses mental health. They say to the woman, you would have problems with this pregnancy should you carry it to term. And there are babies being aborted well into the 3rd trimester, even in Texas and across this nation.
Okay, and there's 1.4% of late-term pregnancies that are terminated, like you're saying. And the overwhelming number of those are fetal abnormalities.
Reported, but one is too many. And I certainly question that 1.5 statistic.
Jason? Thank you for raising the biological question. So I had a question for you with a biological bent. So even if everything goes right in the beginning, you said that conception happens when sperm and egg come together?
Sperm and an egg come
when
together.
They meet together?
Yes, when they meet.
So there's something called a teratoma that even when the egg implants on the uterine wall can effectively, a loose way to describe it is that a cancer forms. The cells divide uncontrolled and it effectively becomes a cancer.
A hydatiform mole.
Okay. Sorry, say that again?
Hydatiform mole.
Essentially. So is that in your mind still a human?
No, that is not a pregnancy. That is not a
That's
pregnancy.
not a pregnancy.
That is a hydatiform mole
Okay.
that mocks pregnancy. It
I guess
mocks
I don't know
pregnancy.
what you mean.
It is a cancer. It's a hydatiform mole that mocks cancer. Women believe they're pregnant, and so they are going along, and finally, somewhere in the 20th week, 16 to 20 weeks, the doctor figures she's really, it's not a pregnancy, it's a hydatiform mole.
Okay.
And
so
then
that still doesn't meet your definitions of, it's still
And
an
it's
egg
not
and
a
cell come
pregnancy.
together. Okay. Even though before you said that when those come together, that's a person to you.
But that does not develop into a human being. That develops into a hydatiform mole.
And that's not a person for you, even though it has all the genetic information. I'm just trying to.
It doesn't have the genetic information. When that happens, no, that does not. No, it forms a hydatiform mole. That is not the medical definition of that is not as a pregnancy.
Okay, thank you.
Last question for Dave.
So there's been brought up when I mentioned the Peter Singer about the infanticide of how we would get away from that. You said we hope that we would advance as a society beyond that. Kind of a follow-up to that is There's been several peer review articles, we all know this, that science has really developed recently in China. I looked and I noticed that, for example, in China, there was an article in Harvard that talked about their great development in science and mathematics and so on. Yet with these great advancements in science in China, China is still the leading provider of abortion. In fact, there's also infanticide outside the womb in China, and there's the forced one-child policy in much of China. Now, from a moral standpoint, it seems that what I'm trying to get at here is it seems to me that the science is not just science that answers these questions, but it's a philosophy, it's an ethical answer. So my question is, with the advancement of science, what are your thoughts and what is your evaluation from a moral standpoint of what is taking place in China with infanticide, abortion being the leading abortion provider in the world?
Okay, so Chinese also use science, and they have some very advanced science, right? They have nuclear weapons, and so, just like we do. So why, you're asking a question, why then are there infanticides
Why
there?
is it morally wrong for Chinese to commit infanticide and also commit something against the will? I know they would harm another person's, a woman's desire or a family's desire to have multiple children. Why would those involved with great scientific achievement, why would it be morally wrong to have the one-child policy?
Scientific achievement would be one measure, but also, in my opinion, ethical and moral. There is objective, ethical, and moral.
Is the one-child policy wrong?
How do we determine it's wrong from an ethical standpoint?
First of all, do you believe the one-child policy is wrong in China?
Yes, because it goes against choice. People should be able to choose whether they have children or not. But for the question you're asking, also the infanticide question, yes, infanticides occur in China. They also occur here illegally. And I also believe they're illegal in China as well. So they have determined that that's not legal.
In some parts it is legal.
I'd have to research that, but I wouldn't agree with it being ethical.
It'd be wrong even if it's legal.
Yes. So people make mistakes. I agree.
Well, we got to wrap.
Okay.
Thank you, Dave. We're going to move to closing statements. 5 minutes. I'll start with Lilandra.
Oh, I'm sorry. I was drinking something. Okay. I know that we're not going to determine here whether abortion should be legal or not. And I'm thankful that for the opportunity to discuss this and keep the dialogue going so that, in my opinion, more people understand why abortion should be legal. And I just have to reiterate again that in countries where abortion is illegal, there's no corresponding drop in the number of abortions. And making it illegal isn't going to reduce the number of abortions. Contraception and better education will. And the second part, we talked about what do we consider a human being and what do we consider a person. And I'm just going to have to reiterate again that a woman is a person who has rights, who has constitutional rights. And you can't compel someone to be an incubator for someone else by law. You can't force them to consent to that. So it's choice, and my other part of my argument is consent. That a woman has to consent to be a parent or to give away, to adopt their pregnancy out. And as to the other claims, there are a lot of claims thrown out here today. Again, that's a lot to muck through, but I will try to work through all of them and see where there's evidence that there's more, like for example, more abortion-related deaths than are currently accepted by peer-reviewed sources, and those kinds of claims, and the video claims and those things like that. Thank you for coming out, and thank you for being cordial and hearing me out.
Lilandra Raw. Carol, 5 minutes.
I've been debating for several years, and it's the first time in about 18 years that anyone's debated whether it was alive or not. The last time I debated was in Washington, D.C., and the Planned Parenthood people said it was a baby. So this has been a little bit of a surprise to me, but I know my world is full of surprises. So I thank you for coming out. I thank you for caring. I thank you for caring, for I know that you firmly believe this, and I just have to say that abortion is still the largest unregulated legal industry in the nation today. The reason that the state of Texas had to regulate it is because it did not regulate itself, and it was abusing and killing women, and the state found that out. Pro-lifers couldn't convince the state of that. Health and Human Services for the state of Texas convinced Texas of that. The 8 hours of video taken in Texas can be reviewed online, and you are certainly welcome to do that, but I want you to know that there are brokers in Texas today selling babies' body parts for over $20,000. This is an industry that not only lies to women, it preys on women, and women deserve better. And our job as women and as Texans is to stand up for those women and help them be all they can be. And so we have a lot of work to do, but we do win. You know, this is the Bible and Beer meeting, I thought Scripture was allowed.
Yes.
You know? And I think we win because I think firmly God's on our side, and I must reiterate, we're the only side having babies. It's just a matter of time. Thank you.
Carol Everett.
Thank you.
Thank you all. With that, we appreciate you being here. Visit our website, thebibleandbeerconsortium.com, our Facebook page, and look to seeing you all very soon. Good night.
When I wake up, new mercies meet me, 2 hearses greet me. They search me with an urgency weak, see deep like seaweed. Body bending is cursive, it's worship, it's rehearsal. It's universal, who you work through. The church's purpose is to search you. This verse's purpose is to lurk the murky purpose of the joy thief. I seen it hitting where the joy beat. Inside the commands, the plan B, destroy me. The parts of me that can't enjoy thee. Deploy B, deploy peace. 2 fingers like a 70 boy scene with some bell bottoms. Hell's riding with objects that rejected, better yet they forgotten the compass. That the optics only option is spotting the opera. When adoption got them, it's crop from the topic. It's a process when I'm watching the rock and this promise. Must be honest, it's some blindness, it's time in my progress. Then I remember.
You make us happy when we look at you. You make us happy when we look for you. Satisfaction only happens to those who are glad in you, glad in you. You make us happy when we look at you. You make us happy when we look for you. Satisfaction only happens to those who are glad in you, glad in you. Who are glad in you, glad in you. Satisfaction only happens to those who are glad in you, glad in you.
I tried to find joy in everything. Searched a couple mountains. Even thought I could get it from 2 for 15s that filled my lungs with something higher and inspired me like a 16 or 16. It didn't work, but what did it was the finished work. Brought me back to himself, now I'm living in reverse. Seeing good gifts as a glimpse of the giver, not the gifts as a giver. Merry Christmas if the vision works. If you've seen them, then you get it. An image no sentence can keep out of a mental prison. Our mental was limited with mentioning his existence. When it was finished, that was the beginning of our joy. I love the tension. If I'm happy in you, I'm happy with you. Attraction to you makes suggested passions turn to ashes. Grab the urn and burn it faster than the Jackie Journal track and learning satisfaction serving you. I'm just happy learning you.
You make us happy when we look at you. You make us happy when we look for you. Satisfaction only happens to those who are glad in you, glad in you. You make us happy when we look at you. You make us happy when we look for you. Satisfaction only happens to those who are glad in you, glad in you. Who are glad in you, glad in you. Satisfaction only happens to those who are glad in you, glad in you. Satisfaction only happens to those who are glad in you, glad in you.